can't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Evie and make it look easy.
What's up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. All right, today's video, I'm going to be talking a little bit more about Sins of Sinister. More specifically, not just talking about Sins of Sinister #1, but talking about some things I've been thinking about since Sins of Sinister #1 came out. And this is basically just going to be me talking about some theories and rumors that I have both come up with myself, as well as some things that I've heard elsewhere. I'll try and remember to note where I got these ideas from as I talk about them, but this is going to be kind of a free-form video. It's not going to be the normal fare. Just ride with me on this one. The first thing I really want to talk about is actually something that came up by Dave Busing of Comic Book Herald. Something I saw him tweet where he was talking about the issue of Timeless that came out around the tail end of 2021 or the beginning of 2022. I don't really rightfully remember, but in that issue, we were shown the image of the Orcus flag next to something that read, "While further in the future, another reckoning leaves humanity with dominion over Earth." Now, I find this interesting because what Dave was positing here is that he found it funny that the final issue of Sins of Sinister is called Sins of Sinister Dominion. And the fact that this here points at the idea that Orcus is very likely going to win or get the upper hand, that humanity will finally be at the forefront of all things as they've been wanting to do, and is such a huge deal because when House of X was kicked off, it was revealed that humanity is not fated to be long for this Earth, and that the only way they're going to be able to circumvent their eventual demise is if they merge themselves with machines. This is kind of where all the phalanx stuff is been hinted at. And if you go back to Powers of 10, specifically issues number 2, 4, and 5, that's where you're really going to see the lion's share of all that phalanx business. And while, yes, I'll go back and say again, it was probably my least favorite part of the whole House of X thing, the less I feel Hickman has been involved with it, I feel like it makes a little bit more sense because now the writers like Al Ewing, Kieran Gillen, Jerry Duggan, they're using this stuff while not necessarily deviating from Hickman's plans. They're not being as wordy with it, and I think that was my problem with it, is that Hickman is a really intelligent writer, and he writes in such a way that makes me feel dumb, and I just didn't like that. But in the end, the idea of the phalanx coming back into play, I think is also going to factor in with some of this Orcus business. Right now, at least as far as the current events of Sins of Sinister, Orcus is on the outs. They've been scattered to the wind, but we do know that a Doombot that survived the attack on Latveria when, all of the, mutants decided they were going to take Dr. Doom off the table and then replace him with a clone. We know for a fact one of those Doombots is working with Orcus. We also can probably find it safe to say that a lot of the people who have already been working with Orcus are still there. I don't think anything's really changed there. But the idea that Moira is involved with Orcus and the fact that she is kind of technically thrown in her lot with the phalanx, at least we know she will in the future, something tells me we're going to kind of get an answer to some of those plot threads from 10 Lives and 10 Deaths of Wolverine, more specifically the 10 Deaths of Wolverine, where we focused a bit more on Moira. I feel like we're going to get an answer as to how she ultimately becomes one with the phalanx. And getting back into that phalanx stuff, one of the things I didn't talk about in the video very much was there's a part in Sins of Sinister where Sinister is worried about becoming a Dominion. This is from the Powers of 10 sector of House of X, and more specifically where they were breaking down the types of galactic societies and constructs, and Dominion was at the very top of the list. It's actually stated in Powers of 10 number 5 that a Dominion is a collective of 10 or more Titans acting in unison to control a particular sector or sectors of space in both area and epochs of time. And while the minimum number of Titans needed to compose a Dominion is 10, the average number of Titans in a Dominion is much higher than that. For example, the local Dominion controlling the sector including Earth space is a collective numbering 112 Titans. It's worth noting that in terms of intellect and power, a Dominion is not colloquially godlike, but categorically godlike, and indistinguishable from any and all mythic or religious comparisons. And I also think it's interesting to point out that in that same note, it tells us that the only things a Dominion fears are Galactus, the World Eater, and the Phoenix. Phoenix. Very interesting that the Phoenix is among that, considering who the Phoenix usually hangs out around. Now, the reason why the idea of Sinister being worried about the Earth being consumed by a Dominion, it's of note because it's something that actually happens in Powers of 10 number 5. There's an instance where the elder of, I guess what is technically the post-human race at that time, he becomes consumed by the Dominion, because regardless of whatever it was that their wishes were, that they wanted to join, this giant alien ball of matter and intelligence in the sky, the point is that at the end of the day, regardless of whatever they wanted, they were going to become a part of that collective intelligence, but they would no longer have their own identity. They would just be a part of it. They wouldn't exist as some separate force. And that's kind of where you start getting into the Titans. And for those wondering, because I did mention Titans earlier, Titans are an interstellar society that has become so advanced that the density of its unified intelligence has collapsed space-time into a singularity, basically meaning they're a black hole. All universal societies exist in partially atemporal space, but unlike strongholds or dominions, Titans are a singular hermetic intellect, isolationist and not a collective or a group. Like all universal societies, on the Kardashev scale, a Titan represents a typo civilization. And for those that are wondering what a typo civilization is in layman's terms, basically no different than a human civilization. What you think of as the human race and civilization, that's what a typo civilization is. Basically meaning more or less that Titans function pretty much no differently than a human society, just on a much grander scale. The idea is that Sinister recognizes that the world is going to reach Dominion status, and the idea is to do it before they are absorbed. Now, the reasoning behind why he's trying to do it is likely because he knows that at the end of it all, they're going to be wiped out and erased regardless. But maybe if he can get them to Dominion status and, I don't know, maybe manipulate matters in some way, he could potentially get them to that Dominion status before they're consumed and potentially, in a roundabout way, save the world. Now, this is going to sound crazy, but I actually think the reason why he's attempting to do this is because, as it's stated in Powers of 10 number 5, consuming cultures and societies is difficult work. It takes a lot of energy to do so. If Sinister could ensure that the Earth became such a high-minded technological infrastructure in society, he could basically make it to where maybe they would be too much trouble for another Dominion to come along and want to consume. Because as it's stated by Nimrod in that series, that we reached beyond ourselves to build a world mine and attract a galactic suitor, a protector. Instead, we attracted a predator, and a hungry one at that. The Phalanx are built to consume worthy cultures and add consumed societal intelligence to theirs, and by extension, to their masters. But this is taxing work, and the energy cost is high. They must eat to survive. As Nimrod points out, whenever the Phalanx consume an entire society, nothing is left behind. Maybe this is why Sinister is doing what he's doing. As I said in my video for Sins of Sinister number 1, everything he's doing is very likely self-serving in matter. But at the end of the day, if it protects the Earth, that means it protects himself. Now, getting back to the Titan part of it, there was something I saw someone bring up, and this was actually, I believe, in the comment section of one of Dave's videos, and I believe it was for the video of Sins of Sinister number 1, but one of the things that was brought up is, what if Mr. Sinister is the Trickster Titan that we have been told about throughout the course of Inferno and 10 Lives and 10 Deaths of Wolverine, the very same Trickster Titan who is one of the Phalanx who sent Omega Sentinel back in time in order for her to change events so that Orchis would win rather than lose. We know that in every conceivable timeline that Moira is aware of, mutants always lose, but from Omega Sentinel's perspective, humans always lose. It's the mutants who always win. So there's two conflicting timelines going on here, and I think it's safe to say we don't really know exactly which one we're actually in right now, but it could go either way. And I'm thinking, based on the things we talked about earlier, if Timeless from 2021 to 2022 is anything to go by, it means that Orchis is going to win, which means Moira is in her correct timeline as opposed to Omega Sentinel being in hers, where, they always lose. And the idea of Sinister being the Trickster Titan, it kind of makes some modicum of sense just based on the idea that if Sinister is trying to find some kind of way to circumvent the whole Dominion thing, get the Earth to a Dominion status so that they could potentially avoid being consumed by yet another Dominion, maybe somewhere along the road he becomes the Trickster Titan, or at least turns the Earth birth into the Trickster Titan, and he is somehow at the forefront of that. That is also a very real possibility, and we see this in Powers of 10, number 4 and 5, where when the Phalanx arrive to consume the Elder, the Phalanx takes a form that, while it's not exactly familiar to us, it's one that I could very easily see being Mr. Sinister somewhere down the road. The cape isn't exactly as flashy, but all of this takes place in the year 1000, and we know Sins of Sinister is going to take place at some point in the year 1000. They're going to reach up to that timeline, as well as they're going to be delving into some of the year 100 stuff, so it's safe to say, yeah, we could very well see something along these lines. But that's where things get kind of muddy, because if Sinister is trying to prevent humanity from being consumed by the Phalanx in the long run, it would mean that whatever it is that Moira's doing and whatever it is that he is doing are very much butting heads with one another, because we know that eventually Moira becomes one with the Phalanx. That is what she is fated to become. She is fated to become an avatar of the Phalanx, who is more powerful in the future than she will ever be at this particular point in time. And we know that that same Trickster Titan sent Omega Sentinel into play to fix the narrative and allow humanity to get one up on the mutants. If any of this is in any way, shape, form, or fashion going to play out, that could mean a couple of things. It could mean that the Sinister we have been following this entire time ends up becoming the Trickster Titan, or that means one of the other Sinisters that we've been keeping up with is one of the Trickster Titans. We know that the spade-headed Sinister was Orbis Stellaris, who had been hiding their true identity this entire time, and of course, we know the club-headed Sinister was Dr. Stasis, who's been working alongside Orcus. It could very easily end up being any one of them that could also wind up being the Trickster Titan, but I think it would make more sense, or at least be more interesting, if it was the diamond-headed Sinister, if that were the case. But yeah, this is where things get really muddy and tricky. I don't really know if that is something that I would want to play out. I feel like the idea of the Trickster Titan, if it does wind up being a Sinister, which I could very easily see that being the case, I would hope it's the diamond-headed Sinister. But if it is, in fact, Mr. Sinister, that means that he's playing some kind of a game that we just cannot wrap our skulls around, because the Phalanx, and we even see in this when the Titan avatar, whatever, that's in Powers of 10, does actually refer to themselves as a we, an us, a them. They don't refer to themselves in any kind of individual sense. And if that's the case, what if the Trickster Titan was like a mass collective of Sinister clones, since we know that the Sinister clones are a thing right now? Now, one of the things that came up while I was analyzing this particular theory is, what if we replace Mr. Sinister with Moira? If you think about it, Hickman kind of already set up the logical progression. She's already become a machine, so technically she's kind of already on the road to this evolution. We know she's going to become a Phalanx later. Who's to say that the next logical progression for her isn't a Titan, or maybe even worse, a Dominion? Moira being the Trickster Titan would make even more sense, honestly, than Mr. Sinister, if only for the reason that initially Moira started out as not necessarily being anti-mutant, but just not wanting to be a mutant herself and wanting to give other mutants the opportunity to no longer be mutants if they chose to. And then eventually, after her fiery encounter with Destiny and Mystique, she became incredibly pro-mutant, because she knew that if she didn't, Destiny and Mystique would come back to set her on fire yet again. And I don't know about you guys, I've never been set on fire before, but I imagine it's an experience that, regardless of whether or not you are an immortal or someone who can reincarnate upon death, I imagine it would be an experience that would stick with you. But then we progress to the point where Moira becomes anti-mutant, that now she has been spurned by Krakoa. She wants vengeance against the mutants. She has died and become a cyborg and thrown in her lot with Orcus. If anybody would have a vested interest in Orcus winning the war between humanity and mutant kind, who we also know exist in the far-flung future, who is already seemingly possessed by an alien techno-organic race, if anyone would be the Trickster Titan who would send someone back in time in order to ensure that Orcus wins, I mean, honestly, Moira would make the most sense. Or who knows, maybe both of them are trying to become the Trickster Titan. Maybe that is the end game of Sins of Sinister. I don't know. I'm just kind of spitballing here. I don't really know if any of this is actually going to come to pass, but I do find it incredibly interesting. It's one of those deals where that's kind of why I wasn't so crazy about all of this during House of X and Powers of 10, because it made me think too hard, and it seemed like it was overcomplicating matters. I like that Kieran Gillen is addressing all this stuff, but I also like that he's not trying to overdress it like it was in Powers of 10. I felt like they were just doing huge information dumps about the Phalanx, and it just didn't really work for me. But I do stand by my statement from the original video that Sinister is going to wind up being the hero in all of this. Maybe not directly, but definitely it's something that I feel like he is going to wind up being thrust into that position to be the person who ends up saving everyone. Even if he's doing it in a very problematic fashion, even with the whole idea of, having everybody, essentially, quotey fingers, microchip, the way that conspiracy theorists seem to believe that we are being, quotey fingers, microchip currently with COVID vaccines. And I know some people won't like this particular thing that I have to say about Sins of Sinister because, it's gotten to that point, but I do get the sneaking suspicion that Storm, for as much as she's gotten away with over the past couple of years, since House of X, I feel like at some point she is going to wind up getting killed. That's not something I necessarily want, but it's one of those situations where I feel like she has overcome such insane stuff. Like I've mentioned in the previous video that she beat Vulcan not once but twice. She defeated Tarn the Uncaring in a fight to the death. She defeated Death in a fight to the death, and she has just overcome so many wild things that I feel like at the end of it all, something's gonna happen where Storm is either going to be killed during the end of all this, because that's kind of the rub here, is that she has no Cerebro backup. The only way she could come back is through the waiting room, and that's if she wanted to come back. I feel like just to keep the stakes kind of even, I wonder if they are going to make it to where she does wind up dying towards the end of this, and I feel like that would be the one death that X fans would feel harder than anyone else. And once again, what I'm saying, I don't want that to be a thing. I don't want Storm to die, because if that was the case, they would probably do it in such a fashion that if she died, she would stay dead for a while. I wouldn't want to lose that character in any way, shape, form, or fashion, because I still feel like there is so much more you can do with that character. But yeah, I can't really think of anyone else right now in an era where every mutant and X-Men character can die and be resurrected like that. I honestly can't think of any other mutant that could die right now that couldn't come back that would hurt as much. Think about it, with Magneto, when he died, we knew he wasn't going to come back, and that one hurt. It legitimately hurt, because not only did it kind of almost seemingly come out of nowhere, I mean, we saw it coming, but at the same time we didn't see it coming. It hit hard, and I was still, even after seeing him die in one issue during Judgment Day, and then coming back to it, a couple of weeks later with X-Men Red, it just, oh my god, it hit, and I was like, man, that actually hurt. But once again, I don't want to see Storm die. Everybody's gonna take this as me wanting Marvel to kill off Storm, and that's going to be the headline that everybody tries to go with. That's not what I'm going with. Please stop. But what I'm saying is, I have a sneaking suspicion something bad might happen to her. A lot of the other plot threads that are going on right now, I personally feel like they're not necessarily addressing in any meaningful way. Like, a lot of people are wanting to see the return of Apocalypse. We might see that. We might not. I personally don't think that any of the big major storylines that are going on in X-Force or X-Men proper regarding the Children of the Vault or any of that, I don't think any of that is going to be addressed in this or anywhere else for that matter until we get done with this and get back to those books. But I do personally think that if anything is going to be addressed, I do feel like anything that is based out of a Rocco is very likely to happen. And if that is in fact the case, then the only one of those particular instances I think could happen would be Apocalypse. I think Apocalypse is a safe bet that, even though I don't think it will happen, I feel like maybe if we do see Apocalypse return, maybe it'll be somewhere in Sins of Sinister, especially when you consider the fact that Sins of Sinister is a spiritual successor to Age of Apocalypse. So what better way to bring back Apocalypse and bring him back during what was, in Age of Apocalypse, one of his subordinates' storylines. That's really all I can think about right now as far as like theories and ideas and stuff like that, musings I wanted to talk about. Like I said, a lot of this is me spitballing, talking off the cuff, with the exception of a couple of panels that I cited. I don't really have any notes in front of me right now, so we're just talking. But anyways, let me know what some of your theories are regarding Sins of Sinister. What ideas do you have about how it's going to end, where it's going, and what the aftermath of Sins of Sinister is going to be? Do the YouTube thing, hit that subscribe button and help me reach 100,000 subscribers here on YouTube in 2023, and hit that notification bell so that way you don't miss any videos that I put out. Don't forget to like, share, and let me know what you think about Sins of Sinister so far. Keep it plus ultra and sound off in the comments.